What's up YouTube, and welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today I'm going to show you how you can make this fox design where he's having a little rest in the blizzard. Now, as always, there's links to everything you're going to need in the description down below. There is the palette, the canvas size, and there is also a stencil guide that you're going to need for today's tutorial. Now, today's tutorial is going to be a painting aesthetic. You're going to see your design go through from basic foundation shapes through to details and then environmental factors such as the snow. Now, to be honest, this tutorial could probably be a little bit quicker than it is. You can spend as long as you want doing details, just like I have done in the tutorial, or you can just make a sort of basic sort of shapes and shadows and highlights and move straight onto the environmental factors. It's totally up to you, but I will guide you through the entire process, of course, step by step. And as always, if you like the video, please drop a like down below. Comment as well what you thought of a design like this, and subscribe, of course, for weekly Procreate tutorials. But if you want even more tutorials from me, I post 3 exclusives every single month over on my Patreon to my Patreon supporters. You can find a link to that in the description down below and support me and the channel by doing so. So with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, the first thing we're going to want to go ahead and do is change our background color. So if we go up to our layers and we go to our background color, we're going to tap this color here in the very bottom right of the palette. Now what you'll see immediately once I do that is I've already added in the stencil guide for today. So to do that, just go up to your actions, go to the option of add and insert a photo. You'll then be able to pick the photo from your gallery once you've saved it from the requirements, and then you'll be able to drop it into the canvas. Now, what I want to sort of make very apparent sort of straight off the bat, and I'm going to rename this layer stencil while we do that, is I want this to be a loose painting design. So we don't want to get too sort of bogged down in details. And with the little snowy effects that we're going to add on to the fox itself, you're going to cover up quite a lot of the detail anyway. So what I've got is I've got my stencil and I've got my layer of a brand new empty layer. I'm going to drag it underneath. We're going to leave our stencil at the top. And we're going to go ahead and block in 2 layers. And this is going to be the ground first of all. So we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this color here at the bottom of that second column from the right. Now you've got 2 sort of options here. You can go ahead and use something like the monoline brush. That's a pretty good brush to do so. So we'll do that. Or you can use something else, maybe like dry ink or something like that. But to start with, we're going to use the monoline just to block in some basic shapes and go from there. Now what I want to go ahead and do is with the monoline brush, I want to go ahead and sort of set the size down to about sort of 67%. And I want to really kind of just allow this brush now to get kind of like really kind of bumpy and lumpy, and I can go back in later and I can see I've got quite a lot of sort of stabilization on mine, so I'm going to have to go back in afterwards, or just as I'm doing it now, just make the sort of line a little bit more sort of wobbly. And once you go edge to edge, you should be able to drag and drop your color in, and that's just going to be the blanket of snow that sits in front of our fox. And I'm going to go ahead and just sort of just wobble that out and flatten it out a little bit on the edge. I'm then going to go ahead and go to my layers and create another new layer and drag it underneath that one. And then we're going to add in that line there at the back. So again, we'll just go along here. You don't need to sort of add too much detail to this one. You can vary it up if you want. Obviously, when it runs in behind the fox, it doesn't really matter. As long as you go edge to edge, you can drag and drop the color in, and you've added that big blanket of snow in the background too. Now we're going to go ahead and work on the background first. And to do that, we're going to create a new layer, drag it underneath that back bank. And we'll rename that exactly that. We're going to rename that layer, the one at the very back here. We'll just call it back bank. So the banking of the hill. And we'll rename the one above it and we'll call it front bank. Just so that you know what layers I'm referring to when I call them by their name. So this layer underneath the back bank, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. And we're going to add in some elements into the sky and in the background, kind of like this blizzard effect. So we're going to grab this middle color here in the far right column. Your brush wants to be set to the option of elements, and we're going to use the clouds brush. We're going to set the opacity to max, and size wise, going to be around sort of 80%. And we're just going to go ahead and just sort of give a very sort of loose coating across the whole of the background area here. Something nice and loose like this. Nothing too sort of detailed. A cloud here in the top left area, and maybe a little bit in that gap there. Then go back, go to my motion blur, and again, just drag down in that bottom right kind of fashion to about 25%, just creating that sort of blizzardy look. And then tap on my adjustments when I'm done. Now we're going to go ahead and leave the background for a moment. We're going to move forward, and in fact we're going to move on to our main subject of our fox. And so we're going to go ahead and create a new layer in between the front bank and the back bank, and we'll rename this and we'll call it fox, because we're only going to somewhat use one layer for this. So we're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab this color here at the bottom of the third column from the right. Your brush wants to be set to the one that we're going to use for today, which is going to be painting and the Salamanca brush. And size-wise, it's going to vary up and down. At the minute, we're at sort of 6%, but that's looking a little bit too small because the first step that we're going to go for, around about sort of maybe about, well, let's go a bit bigger than that, maybe about 15%, is blocking in some color. And you can see the outline of the fox here. Now, we want to sort of remember that the sort of fur is going to go in this direction down the tail, and it's also going to sort of swoop down into this area here, down towards sort of the tummy area. Now I'm going to reduce that down just a little bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very lightly now start to block in. Now what you'll notice is once I do that, one, I'm trying to abide by the lines still because I want to sort of get the fur moving in a certain direction and have that kind of effect. Is once we start to sort of get the colour in, you'll notice it is quite sort of pasty to start with. And that's fine. We're just putting in like a base layer here. We're letting the tail sort of come around from the back here. Lovely stuff. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go down into this groove here. Probably reduce the brush size down to about sort of 8%. And where this line is here that you might just about be able to see, you'll see it on your stencil anyway, is going to be pushing the brown area here down and in towards the tummy. Now, one thing you'll also notice is because we're doing it on one layer, certain things we have to sort of remember, such as the tail is now going to be on the same layer. And even though they are sort of separated in distance, for example, the tail's in front of the body, we need to remember not to get a bit too messy when we get close to the tail. We don't want to sort of run into it and ruin what we've already done. Now, at the same time, it's not also super critical for you to do that. Now, you notice I'm just running the fur down the body into that gap down there. So I'm darkening up a little bit. I'm leaving this top edge a little bit brighter just so we can see the separation. And along the back here, I'm just going to go and just literally just zigzag and just block in the color like so. And that's what you should always do with these kind of painting designs to start with, is just get a loose block of color in there, work out where the fur is going to start to change color here and what there, and where your highlights and shadows are going to be. Now I've just increased the size a little bit more just to sort of darken up this area right in front of us down into here. And if we take a look at it already, you can kind of see the top edge of the tail here is a little bit lighter, where we're going to introduce some highlight tones. I will get a little bit closer up to there, and I'm constantly trying to abide by where the fur is going to be moving. It's going to be moving down this tail, so my movements of my brush are going in that direction. They're going slightly down towards that bottom right area, and I'm going to curve the sort of fur around here, around the sort of backside area, and then over here as well. So blocking in that early patch of colour, get that in. Now we're going to go ahead and block in the face as well, and just like before, we're going to sort of abide by kind of where the fur's going, but also not sort of worry too much because a lot of this colour may end up getting taken out anyway. So we're going to go down, sort of pushing down here, down towards where we just were. I'm just going to block in the colour. And if you do it all in one movement, it will also start to smudge as well. So you can keep it nice and light. You see here, I'm just going to go all the way through the ears, block the ears in. That's fine. We want to just get the basic full body shape in. And I'm trying to do it all in one movement to an extent, and then come down here, and then block that in as well. And we'll push a few little areas of fur where I've had to let go. I can now sort of push round over the top of the eyes, block that in, and we're going to push across over here. Now you notice I'm going to go down the nose here, and then I'm going to go ahead and try and just get those sort of line markings in, so that it's going to go a little bit sort of straighter, of course, isn't it, down the bridge of the nose, and then just sort of round off round the eyes a little bit more like so. So just rounding off here, and we're just getting some very basic patches in here now, kind of just blocking in the top sort of area here of the eyes. We want to darken up actually where the eyes are going to be, because they'll be nice and dark later on. And even though this area in here, so this area and this area are going to be somewhat lighter colors, we are going to get in there and just block in a very light shade of the more browny orangey tone. That's fine. Let's get it all in, because at the end of the day, if you end up seeing a little bit of the brown through, that's great, because all that is just additional tones. It's just additional color, isn't it, that you see and you spot just through your little fox there. Now, again, you can see I've darkened up the eyes, so we went round in a circle there, and you can push that down a tiny bit, so bringing it down, pushing it down just to where this line here, these two little arcs here separate the white fur from the orangey brown fur. So I'm going to go ahead and, I don't want it to be super, super dark, but I do want to make sure that sort of insides of the eye area here do have a good amount of colour to them. We do have darker tones to be adding in later on. And also, we're not going to focus too much on the face yet, because I want to start on the body area. So this is what we're kind of looking for. I'm just going to go ahead and just give that one more extra coating, just to kind of block that in a bit more at the top. Lovely stuff. And we're going to move back here to the body. So we're going to start to just dash in colour. So we've started with this colour here, the bottom of that third column. We're going to stay with it for a moment. So it's a little bit of a darker colour. So where this line is, I want this to be really dark fur. It's where sort of the neck and the body kind of fold in on themselves. The brush size is just about 3%. We're going to be around that mark pretty much at the moment while we just sort of get some of the little scratches in here. Now, when you're doing a painting like this, I said earlier about how your layers are kind of separated even though they're on one layer. Which items are in front of which? You kind of want to start at the back and make your way forward. Because later on, if we were to sort of really detail this and then now get in here with the darker colour, we would overlap maybe some of the fur and ruin some of the aesthetic of it. So if we start at the back, i.e. sort of the body area, we can make our way forward and along the tail. And then once we've made our way along the tail, we can then go ahead and make our way up the neck and onto the head. So I'm darkening up into this little patch here, just trying to darken up here and then bring that darkness also up around the back of the neck. So you're going to have to sort of follow along with me as we go. We're going to darken up down here. And I'm just doing lots and lots of little dashes. If I zoom right in for you, you can see sort of the effect that I'm trying to get with the brush, where every dash that we do, every little line that we do is some additional sort of details in the fur. And then you can also just sort of let that brush just kind of flick outwards a little bit on the edges here to create little areas of fur that are making their way away from the body. Don't go too mad with those because they're going to be quite detailed in a painting aesthetic. So we want to sort of remember that at all times. And I'm going to go a little bit further up into where I've put these little dash lines here on the template. And when we get to there, that's kind of our limit. So we're going to keep dashing in here. Keep dashing. We're going to go along sort of this back area and bring some of the darker color along the tail and over towards here. So I'm going along the tail line here, bringing in some color up to here. Now there is an additional line on the stencil that you also will be able to see, and that is this area here. It's going to be where we've got some darker fur. So I'm going to go ahead and block that in. And it's all going in a bit of a horizontal fashion. I want to sort of let that get darker, but also make sure it's obviously going to be ready to run down and follow the flow of the fur. And then we're going to go ahead and make the brush size 6% and just give a little bit of additional sort of color in here, because what we can do is we can layer on top of this with additional tones and kind of break down the solid darkness. So now I've just run some lines running into this direction. We're then going to change our color into a slightly lighter one, the middle of the third column. We'll get back into the initial area we were working with, about sort of 3% down here. And we're just going to sort of just dash around. Remembering again, we want to kind of flow the fur down. And I'm just going to sort of brighten up here with a couple of little dashes of paint. And I will refer to it as paint because that is what this brush is. It's going to give us that kind of painting look to it. And that's what I want to aim for. So we're pushing the fur down the neck and then down into this little mark. Just adding in variations in the colour now by just sort of scraping on top of those areas of fur. Just keep going. And then we'll go ahead and change our colour to the top of the third column, which is a slightly lighter tone again. So top of the third column from the right. And now we're going to go ahead and up here, going to try and just add some more in. You can sort of flex your brush up and down. You can go 4% and give it some really light pressure, and then just create lots of little sort of flicks and streaks up here. Flick them down the neck, down into towards there, and leave that a little bit darker. So you leave your darker tones underneath and you paint with the lighter tones on top. In this example anyway. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is try to make our way backwards onto the body over here. Now I'm going to keep the same color we were just working with, because I'm going to now start to bring with the 4%, dashing in here, following the lines of our fox. And you can even go bigger, you can go 7% and really sort of just streak in the lines. But at the same time, bear in mind, we don't want to sort of draw hair, do we? We don't want to draw long flowing hair. We want to draw little sort of tiny brushes of fur all making their way down. Now we're brightening right up towards the edge of the stencil here because we've got some lovely brighter tones to be building on top of here. Now I'm going to go round the back side again and push the colour down and try to block this in a bit more. So we're just building up the colour. It takes a little while to do. I'm going to go ahead and build that colour down into here, and then I'm going to leave that because we don't want to go too far down there. We're then going to change our colour. We're going to start to move into some additional little tones, and we're going to grab, for example, this colour here. So the middle colour in that fourth column from the right. Brush wants to be around about sort of 3%, and this one's going to sit primarily on the sort of top edge over here. So very sort of top edge. We're going to just dash along here, just scraping the paint in, and try not to sort of work too detailed too early. Don't try and add in too many sort of individual blades at this early stage. You know, let's just highlight the edge of the fur here that's just making its way around onto the other side and just brighten up that top edge. I'm making the highlight a little bit bigger than it needs to be. I'm going to come along here, and then I'm also going to add in like a couple of little areas of lighter color just on the back of the neck here. Just a little bit along this line here. And you can see if we zoom in, there isn't much detail there, but the combination of colors, when you look at it, starting to build up, starting to really build up the sort of variation in all the different colors of the fox. Now at this point, I'm then going to go ahead and start to just add in some additional lines, just sort of scraping in and pushing down towards what will be the belly, but we're going to keep these brighter tones right at the very top edge. And then keep pushing this. Now, what I sort of mentioned at the beginning of this and in the intro, we're going to have sort of snow sat on top of the fox's fur over here. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up losing a lot of the sort of color, to be honest, and the detail that we're working on right now. And with that said, don't sort of add too much sort of focus on this area. Let's see how it works out in the end. You'll always be able to come back to this layer later on, but for a minute, you know, we're just trying to brighten up highlight, and then darken shadows. I'm going to add in a couple more sort of flicks in here, just some additional ones just down the neck in the fur. They'll look great. Just a couple of sort of stray hairs that are just catching the light and just making their way down. Then we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to grab the top color here in the fourth column from the right. And this is going to somewhat be this area here. So it's going to be like a big bright spot on the sort of side of the fox. And I'm going to try to scrape in some lovely light patch on here. Now what we end up doing is, because we then end up leaving our sort of original base colors that we added, every sort of gap that we leave is just a shading, and it's like the individual sort of areas where the light isn't quite getting through, or it's just a darker patch on the actual fur. So we end up sort of allowing for that depth in the fur. Let's then continue, and we're going to make this go a little bit further down in towards the body. Now I'm pushing downwards. Now I'm pushing at quite an angle, pushing down, scraping sort of along. And I say scraping, it's just like the brush, just scraping along the canvas, pushing its way down, and then curling some of those neck hairs down and in towards the belly area. And we just add in a few on there as well. And it's the fur's somewhat starting to come together, but we've got this area here to now work on. So we're going to go to our colors, and we're going to start off with the top color here, the top of it's actually the sixth column from the left. So the top of the sixth column as normal. And we'll go ahead and we're going to sort of start to darken up the back area here. So now we're going to start to darken up and really get the basics of all this color that we need to add especially towards the rear of the fox. I'm going to start dashing, adding in the colour, and then start to think about pushing it along here, following the sort of texture and the flow of the fur along here. We don't need to go too far down because we've got some really dark colours to be adding. So we're going along here, curve round, lots and lots of brush strokes. Your information of your canvas at the end is going to be hundreds, if not thousands of brush strokes in this particular design. So that's looking cool. Let's then go ahead and change to a slightly darker tone again. So we'll grab the middle colour in the 6th column and we'll start to brush in some additional colour with this. And now we're looking to sort of darken up towards, right up towards the rear in this little groove here, which we added, and kind of just allow the first few colours that we added to sort of sit on the edge here, and then the darker tones sit in this groove and then on the actual tail itself. So I'm darkening up here, and you can let the odd one run astray at the top, just like a little sort of dark patch is fine. Let that run down, and then we're going to flip the angle and we're going to come along the edge of the tail here, darkening up this gap here, and I'm going to flick the fur upwards round here, just flicking that fur up, flicking the fur outwards. So I appreciate with this type of tutorial you're probably going to have to watch and then probably rewind quite a few times just to sort of go back over and then apply it to your design yourself, and that may be the easiest way for you to do that. But with this type of style, it's very different, isn't it, to some of the other ones that we do, where this one is very much a slower process and is very much just constant dragging and scratching onto the screen to add in some details. Now you can see I'm going right up towards that bright edge where we're going to end up having some really lovely bright highlights. And as we get further down here, I'm trying to sort of convert the sort of fur change where it's, rather than going upwards, it's sort of flicking and then making its way down the tail. And again, I'm not too concerned about the tail right now, other than sort of starting to get some of the lines in there, little bits of fur that just come around from this area here more so. Flick a few down at the bottom. All about build up. Then if we go to our colours and we move to even the darker tone again, bottom of that column, bottom of the 6th column. In here, we're going to end up adding in some real dark tones in here. So you're going to need to be brave. You may want to reduce your brush size down to a slightly smaller 4% or even a 3. Totally up to you, whatever you're most comfortable with. And I'm just going to sort of zigzag my pen. I'm not going to do too many sort of dashes with this because you do end up with quite a lot of colour get dropped in. And go right up to the stencil line here. So dig that black fur right up into that line. Don't worry about your highlight edge because again we're working from back to front. So get in here and really expand on this area here and try and just paint in there now. Maybe the old sort of dashes will be fine, but just paint, just smudge and paint what you've added in and just shade into that area. If you notice your areas such as here, mine's looking a little bit too sort of smooth and smudgy almost. I'm just going to get in there then and just darken that up with a few additional dashes just to sort of darken up the fur. And then towards the rear of the fox, I'm definitely going to start to add in a couple more scrapes in here, break up the fur. Lovely stuff. And then make my way just a little bit higher into this area here. Just a little bit. Little sort of dashes and then painting, dashes and then painting. And you can do quite literally like a little sort of wave, a little wiggle with your pen. That'll be perfectly fine. Let's then also start to move down here. So we're going to start to sort of pivot outwards from this area here. We're going to sort of pivot out. If you're hearing Ross from Friends, let me know in the comments. Every time I say the word pivot, that's all I hear. I'm just going to darken up the rear. Now you'll notice it's not really doing much because I'm pressing very, very lightly at this point, and then I'm going to try and paint in there. So just kind of smudge it along a little bit more and then get back in there with some more dashes and then paint, dashes and paint, dashes and paint. And then from there, we're just going to allow the fur to go from sort of this point here outwards. Okay, so this point there outwards. And once we do that, we can then let the fur just naturally run down the tail from where we were. I'm going to increase the brush size up to about 7% because I want sort of the larger sort of scrapes. I want the fur sort of detailing. I'm just going to keep pushing out from here. We are going to make our way down the tail shortly, but for a minute it's just that blend between the tail area and the body. And the better sort of amount of colour you can put in here, so being brave with the colour and your line work, the more believable this area is going to be as well. The more believable that the colour is just pivoting out. And again, we're going to add snow back here as well, so your fur lines will get a little bit lost, so please don't sort of be too precious over your lines and your paint. Just allow that blend of all the different colours. And just like you can do with obviously any of our tutorials, you can always go back to a slightly lighter tone. We can go up to the top of the 6th column here and then get back into this dark area. And you've got to be very, very light though. You can add in sort of strand hairs here and there by being very, 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 very gentle and just sort of stroking over the top of the darkness. Totally optional, totally up to you based on your design, but that's coming together nicely. We've got this nice darker patch here at the rear, and we're going to make our way down the bottom of the tail. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this color here again, the middle color in that 6th column, and we are just going to brush, brush, brush all the way down here. Now, at this sort of scale and area, we can go up to something around about sort of 14% and just flick from the bottom to where the darkest tones are going to be. Flick from the bottom. That's why I said don't get too precious over this area here. We're just going to flick all the way down, and this is going to be quite a time saver at the same time. Not that we're interested in saving time, but it will be. And I'm just making my way down sort of the line there of the stencil and allowing the end of the brush to flick outwards. Definitely darken up here, and you can already see how that lighting is going to start to be affected. You can go back over some of your darker colours if needs be, but we'll switch back to the darkest tone, the bottom here of that 6th column, and we're going to do exactly the same but just not go quite as high. So we're just going to go down the tail here, adding in this darker tone all the way down. And this brush has a fantastic texture to it as well, so you will get lovely amounts of texture. Now I'm also trying to also flick outwards at certain angles that are slightly sort of more upright than the angle that I was initially going with the fur, just to try and add in some additional sort of detailing in the fur. So the odd sort of hair that's maybe not brushing in the same way, or it's slightly running slightly astray, that's fine. I like that. It's just like nice variation in the fur, and you can see how much that's coming together nicely. Let's then also go ahead and start to bring the brush size down to about sort of 8% and get those little flicks on the end in if we can, keeping them really, really light with this brush, because again, because we've got highlights to add in, these darker tones are going to start to form underneath. So we're going to just add in some little flicks with this brush, and feel free at any point as well, turn off your stencil. Turn off your stencil. You don't necessarily need it at this point here. We can see the gap that we've formed between the hair, which actually is helping us a little bit as well. It's going to give us some nice area to add some color to. And if we go to our colors, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to grab this color here, the middle color in the 4th column from the right. Keep that brush size probably around about sort of 5%. And on that edge, we are going to paint and scrape. We're going to paint and scrape. So we want to go up and over and in towards the body. Now that one there was a little bit too bold, but this top area here, you don't really want to leave any white specks. We're going to add the highlight right onto the edge of the tail and add some flicks in here that come a little bit further down and in towards the body of the tail, if that makes sense. So the main area of it. Bring your color down. Now, if you wanted to, if you were someone who really sort of struggled with the concept of having it all on one layer and running into other areas, because I know a lot of people will be very used to sort of the formalities of Procreate and how we do have this wonderful luxury where we can just simply paint where we want and create layers to separate things as well. You could have separated potentially the tail. The only reason I've not done that is I wanted to sort of challenge you a little bit, and also at the same time You can get the smudge of the fur a lot nicer as you sort of make your way round from the base of the tail round and up towards the body. But if you were to do this on your own time, that's definitely something that you could do. Now just going along that brush area here, just brushing along that tail, getting into this area here too, and then I'll go back in and add some scrapes in there too. Just sort of smudging along that line, brightening it up like so. Now one thing you can do at this point is, if you didn't quite like how much of a gap there is between the tail and the body, we can go to our layers and create a new layer and drag it underneath the fox. Then go to our color and grab this color here, the bottom of that third column from the right, which is our base color, and just simply paint quite firmly underneath that gap. It's not going to affect anything that we're working on other than the fact it's going to cover up a lot of the dots. So just fill in this area here with that darker color and you won't see any of those white specks anymore. For example, if I now turn that layer on and off, you can see how much of a difference it makes to that edge. And then pinch the two layers together. So you can always chuck stuff underneath. That's not a crime. Then we'll go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the top color here in the fourth column from the right. Brush still on that same layer, probably a little bit larger though. In fact, let's be a bit braver. Let's go up to about 11% and just try and just scrape some areas of along that tail. Some flicking outwards at different angles, and your highlights are ultimately going to be the few details that we do see and the ones that are going to stand out the most. But as always, we can then jump back to our shadow color, the bottom of that sixth column, and scrape over the top and cover up some of them, pushing the highlight then back and up towards that ridge line only. There's a lot of sort of backwards and forwards, which I can appreciate, with the Procreate kind of scene is a little bit different. But with a design like this, we can go backwards and forwards and we can build up color and we can layer color on top, which is just going to look so fantastic. Now, at this point, I'm happy with the tail. We're just going to move back into the neck and make our way up the body. So we are going to go back to our stencil and we're going to turn it back on. We're going to go ahead and continue on the same layer, but we're going to go down to the base color, the bottom of the third column. Going to reduce that brush size down to about sort of 5%. And where we had that gap earlier here, I just want to sort of darken that up a little bit more, where the fur starts to just land on top. So I'm following this line here. So I'm just going to go back over, scrape over the top of some of those highlights and darken it up down into this ridge line. I want that separation between the two areas. And I'm just going to scrape a little bit into my highlights just to kind of blend them in a little bit more. So once we've done that, we can then make our way up and into the face, and we're going to do just the same process. We're going to follow the same area of the fur. We're going to continue with the base color that we're working with right now, pushing down. We're going to push down. This curve here, by the way, is going to be white and it's going to make its way that way with the fur. So we also want to kind of accommodate for that a little bit as well. So we're going to go around the eye, darkening that up, and then just sort of curve our brush and push it round this way. Curve it round that shape that I've created for you. Just sort of curve that round, push this area here, and then this is the top of the head and the fur that sort of makes its way outwards from here. And we're just going to go over the top of the brows. Going to go along the base of the ear here, because the ear kind of has this like line here, doesn't it, where it joins the head. We've got this area here as well where we're just going to darken this up. Again, using the base color just to get like a good block of coloring, get kind of the movement of the fur. We're kind of going upwards at this point from the middle of the head, up and outwards, up and out to the left. And you can see I'm also kind of being quite scribbly because I want the variation. I want the brush to have different sort of patchiness to it, because then it just gives me more detail in the fox's fur. You can be really scribbly with it. Scribbling it now all the way along here. The only thing you don't want to do is, just like that previous line, is leave kind of the boundaries. We don't want to sort of be too reckless with it at the same time. We're going to go down here, following the sort of line of the nose, and then flick that color outwards over here and along here. And look at that sort of movement of the fur. This is what I'm talking about. The scrapes of the fur, we're pushing it up and round and over the top of the eyes a little bit. Over the top of the eyes. We'll get some color in here in the nose, because this does actually go into the orange as well. It comes down and makes its way down inside the boundary of the lines, and then it kind of just flicks up and out, and then we get down towards here. Now at this point, I don't really want to get too sort of close. I'll go right up towards sort of the base of the nose, and that's it. We'll leave that area for a moment. Now, as I mentioned, this area here is going to be nice and grey. We've then got this area up here, which I'm just going to add a couple more sort of flicks here to the base of the ear, just where the fur flicks up and out. Just going to do the same on this side too, just flicking that sort of colour up. And this is going to be nice and sort of white and grey. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that blocked in as well. So we're going to move to this colour here, the top of the 5th column. And the fur is moving down this way. It's moving down this way underneath the little chin here and round this area here as well. So it rounds off here. So it rounds off and then comes down the body. And this is the shadow colour. So we're just blocking this in, trying to get the fur movement in. Again, you're going to have one layer. So once you get close towards your tail, just sort of don't run too close to it. If you overlap it, it's fine. You can always come back to it later on potentially. And we're going to flick the fur outwards a little bit here, but making sure it is nice and down. So this layer here is very much critical for you to make sure that you get the movement of the fur moving in that right direction. So I'm just going to flick out from underneath where we've got the neck. I'm going to flick out from here. Just keep pushing out from underneath the chin. Don't worry if you run into the chin, again, because the chin's on top and that's something we're leaving for slightly afterwards. We can always block the colour in anyway. Pushing that in, blocking in some much needed darker patches. Don't be afraid to be nice and bold with the darker colour, because this area here is going to get some highlights laid on top of it. We will just very lightly though, sort of just round these corners off. We'll round them off, pushing in some darker shadow layers underneath. So just kind of scraping that in, and it really is quite an aggressive curve up. It flicks out from here, it goes along, and then it just beautifully just falls down, rounds off and down in towards the chest. So we'll round that off and we'll go make sure we go nice and up, nice and upwards, and then round that off, creating lots of little flicks and curls, and then pushing that colour outwards just towards the edge of the body is great. Getting that in there. And then we should end up with this much sort of darker area now. I'm going to be even braver and just get some more colour in here. Overlap some of the orange as well if you need to, kind of browny tones. On the nose, we don't need to sort of darken that up too much. That's going to be quite a light area anyway. Then we're going to go to our colours. We're going to move to the slightly lighter tone just above it. So just underneath it, so the middle colour in that 5th column. You can drop the brush down to maybe 4% and layer on top, build up the movement in the fur. Pushing that here. Now primarily underneath the chin here is going to stay a little bit darker. That's not to say you can't get up there with this colour here, but primarily that is going to be a darker area. And I'm now just following the fur down here, going around these edges, around here. Lots and lots of taps, lots and lots of scrapes. Pushing that colour around. I'm going to go right up here in towards the nose, pushing that colour, because then I've got these lovely sort of dark tones underneath that I can build on top of with the whites and the greys. They're going to look fantastic. Let's do exactly that. Let's go down to this colour here, the bottom of the 5th column, and let's build up that colour. Now, you could probably go up to about sort of 12% here if you wanted to, and just start to sort of scrape in using the larger brush some like fine fur. If you want to, you can do exactly this. You can just start to build it up, leaving that darker tone underneath the chin, but then bring it down. You've got to bring it down to about sort of 5% here and get really kind of fine with your details. Now we're pushing it up and around. We're following that stencil. We're going to follow it around and we're going to push it into these areas here. We're going to push that colour around right in this area up quite a bit, and show how that fur just makes its way round from the face down and into the chest. So we're building up the process. We're building up that process. And as I probably said in the intro, if I haven't already, just trust that process. You've got to really trust the process with a design like this. It starts off looking a bit ropey. You look at it and think, oh, these are all blocked in, and it's not looking as detailed as it should do. Or in the final product from Joel, it doesn't look like his does. That took a process. That took a process of getting there. So we've got to spend some time just getting towards that end goal. and you gotta get through the ugly stage. So we're brightening this area up here. Lovely stuff. And then down here, I'm gonna reduce the brush size down to maybe around about sort of 2% and try and get some quite bold areas of light fur in here. So I'm now just sort of really dashing, tapping and dashing, and just trying to get some nice big bold white areas of the fur, and transition the sort of darker grey that's underneath the neck into a much lighter, brighter, whiter chest. And we are going to add in a further white as well on top of this, which will give us even more detail and just layering and depth to it. Push some light tone out over here as well, pushing this down in towards that chest. I really appreciate your patience if you are following along with something like this. It's just a slightly different tutorial than some of the ones you've maybe done of mine before. But it's just another skill set. You may find that you really enjoy these kind of painting styles and you want to continue to make more of them potentially. And that's what I try to do. I try to create a lot of variation, whether it's like on YouTube or whether it's on Patreon. Just keep a lot of sort of variation in my content. And then here, I'm just going to try and just bring this curve around a bit more. Lots and lots of taps. You can probably hear it in the mic. I hope it's not wobbling the camera too much for you, but all these taps, all these little scrapes, I'm trying to show the build up in the white fluffy chest. Let's do the same up here. Start to push the bright spots towards the top edge, in towards the face a lot more, and then just scraping around. You know, I want to kind of define the face a little bit, so I'm going to really brighten up sort of that bottom line here and let it run in towards the face. That's fine. Right now, following the stencil, again, feel free at any point to turn that stencil off. Take a look at what you've done so far without being interrupted by the sort of guidelines. And if you're not sort of aware, a stencil is typically where I've drawn this before. I don't want to sort of vary too far away from the one I've drawn in my practices ahead of recording today. So I've provided a stencil because I want to make sure, one, it looks like the one I've drawn previously, and sometimes they can be a little bit trickier. So I want to sort of provide the additional methods to create the final result. Now, at this point, we're going to go ahead and move into a much brighter tone. In fact, we'll move to this color here, the top right of the palette. And this is going to be even brighter now. So we're just going to continue to build up in this area here. I'm going to bring the brush size up to about sort of 3%. I'm going to scrape outwards from here, and I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to bring it around. And I've gone up to, what have I gone up to there? I've gone up to about sort of 6% and just brightening up the white brightest spots, which is just in the face there. Push the whiter tone up out here as well. Curl that round, and then I'm going to bring a much brighter edge as well. Brighten up down here. And I'm going to paint. I'm not going to dash always. I'm going to paint at certain points just to build up the tone. It's looking much nicer. And then I'm actually going to move to white. I'm going to double tap in the top left to select white. I'm going to bring the brush size down, back down to about sort of 3, if not 4%. And I'm going to flick some whiter sort of streaks out from here. Just giving the brightest spots up here to the face. A couple of flicks up here. And then likewise here too. We'll flick up from here. Brightening this up. Build up of colour. And you can see all the different sort of colours and everything that we've built up to this point. Now just layering on top of each other, creating so much depth. You can then also utilize the white by occasionally just thinking of maybe highlighting a few different areas here and there. Don't go mad with the white though, I really wouldn't. I would set the brush size maybe to about 8% here, scrape down here with just a tiny bit, keeping your pressure really light and build in some additional highlights on top, but you should end up with a little bit of a result like this. And just like before, you can always go ahead and grab a much darker tone again. So for example, the top of the 4th column here, which is pretty much black, you can bring that brush size down to about 3% and get under here and build in some of your shadows. So what I mean by that is you can go ahead and get the majority of your line work in, and then at this point think about additional layers of contrast, additional shadows, additional methods that we can add in, some much needed sort of brighter highlights, but also some darker shadows just to boost the contrast, lower sort of the flat look to it. And you can, let's go a bit braver. Let's be about 10% here and just kind of just scrape downwards, pushing the line work down, creating the fur down here. Just sort of smudging those lines together. Lovely stuff. And I'm going to make sure with a 6%, I get right underneath this line here. Just really kind of darken up under that line of our guide. Just darkening that up under there, making sure you do have that depth between the face and also the actual chest. Let's move on and move into the face. So we're going to go ahead and go to our colors, and we started with this color here at the bottom of the third column. So we're going to jump straight to the top of the third column from the right, and we're going to paint in some brighter highlights on this edge. So we're going to push across, we're going to push across over towards here, round into this area here. And what you want to kind of do is just follow the sort of curve of where the white comes up, because that's where kind of the face and the chest sort of meet together. Let's then push this around here. On the top of the forehead, we can start to push some lines up, flicking these out. You've got your beautiful base color underneath, and where you flick, every little blade of sort of the fur is going to start to sort of come about, because you've got the contrast then between the base color and this brighter color that we're adding on top, flicking them upwards. And it's all about sort of looking at maybe your reference photos if you were to ever do this again, maybe with a dog or something like that, and just looking at where the fur flicks outwards. What sort of movement is it? Where does it lead? What direction does it all start to flow in? It comes across here. I'm just going to brighten up the top area here. Along the nose, we can go ahead and brighten up somewhat the right side a bit more than the left. So brightening that up, just blending it across. And then as you get up here, some little sort of flicks here and there will look lovely, just to blend the fur together. And look at the difference on the sort of the top there. Let's reduce the brush size down to about sort of 3%, get under here, underneath the eye, bring those highlights together a bit more. And likewise here, we'll brighten up into here and just bring that along, just introducing the additional tones in there that just run underneath the eye. Now, before we carry on, I want to go ahead and work on the ears. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the top color here in the fourth column. We're going to go ahead and first of all outline them, because they have this beautiful dark line, and I'm going to reduce the brush size down to about sort of 2%. I'm going to follow the line of my sort of stencil guide here. I'm going to go all the way up, and then as I get over to here, I'm going to thicken it up a tiny bit on the top, and then just let that blend out. As it rolls round, you let the fur sort of run out. So I'm going to turn off my stencil. You can just about see that. We're going to go along here. You can make it a little bit bigger than it needs to be, and then just let that fade out on that edge. And then repeat that on this side. I'm going to bring it up from the base, go along the top of the ear, and then let that run out and round where it maybe falls off to the other side where we can't quite see. I'm going to go up here along there. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to just bring our brush up to around about sort of 8%, and we're going to go ahead and bring in our stencil again. And you see this sort of leaf shape here. We're just going to go round in a sort of oval shape and darken that area up. And you kind of want to darken up the left side a bit more on this side anyway. So I'm just creating like a bit of a curve now, and just if I let that brush flick out, and the brush size is 8%, if I just let that brush just flick out, we can let it sort of blend into the fur around it. We'll do the same over on this side. We're going to go ahead and darken up here, creating a bit of a sort of little curve here, darkening this up, and then blend it out to the left a bit more. And that's just going to be right in the ear. But we've got some layers and colors to build up on top of it. Now that's run astray a little bit too much. I wanted to get like a little kind of few bristles here and there of the brush. We'll then go to our colors. I'm going to go ahead and grab this color here, the bottom of that fourth column. Brush is going to get reduced down to about sort of 3%. And we're going to make our way up here. And you kind of want to blend in your black line, so it now gets really thin and then is allowed to be its own sort of space up here. I'm going to go all the way up the ear, all the way up, following right up against where that black line is. And then I'm going to really loosely just flick over and into the ear, where all these little blades of fur are going to nicely just run over the ear. You can let some just really sort of run astray on their own, sort of nice thin wispy lines just to show the fur. You can let them sort of vary up in their angle as well. Don't follow the same angle because all the hair will run in different directions. A couple of flicks outwards like that. That's looking lovely. At the bottom here, we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to flick upwards here. Flick up into the ear. And then we'll do the same. We'll come down this top edge, flicking into the ear a little bit and kind of outlining the ear itself. So I'm just flicking these little loose stray hairs into the ear, then down into the actual head. We'll do the same on the opposite side while we're working with this color. So we just do exactly the same. We just sort of blend in the black line, let that line then get thick at the top but really thin at the bottom. And then from there you can just wiggle your pen. Just wiggle your pen in this area, blocking the color. And then once you've done that, you can then start to sort of streak in the fur line. So let's go up the ear. You can take a look at your other one as well. Keep that in frame so you can see. Get an idea for how far maybe you went into the ear with some of the stray hairs. You may want to increase your brush size even, or even reduce it, whatever's most comfortable for you. Then in the corner here, we flick the fur up and in from this corner. And then we're going to bring that up the ear into this top area here. Blending it in towards the black as well, because obviously they're on the same layer. You can blend those colors together nicely and then flick some hairs off of there. And what you can also do is you can just sort of push the fur, kind of curve it round and then start to push it downwards, almost like it follows then the rest of the head. So I'm kind of just flicking downwards here now, just to kind of let that run down. And we can overlap this. We're not done with the actual fox's head yet anyway. So once we've done that, we can then change our color. We can grab the middle color in the fourth column. This is a much brighter white tone almost. Probably around about the same brush size, to be honest, about sort of 3%. And on top of your lovely sort of orangey tone, we're going to blend in some white over the top, where these are sort of the whiter hairs closer towards the inside of the ear. So the yellow kind of blends into the white. So just adding in some lovely additional white detailing here. More flicks up into the ear. Flicking this out. Blending that into the yellow. You should end up with a little something like this. And feel free at any point, again, 2%, get in there. Create some sort of more detailed flicks of hair if you wish. Just little sort of areas of fur. I'm going to go back up to the 3 though. I'm going to carry on the opposite side. I'm going to go ahead and just detail that in. You just blend in the beautiful yellowy sort of tone into the white. And the white sits quite close onto the edge of the blades that you added in. I'll say the blades, sorry, the strands of hair. Lovely stuff. And then I'm going to bring in some extra white in that corner just to add in some additional patterning. Lovely stuff. Then at this point, what we then need to do is go back to our base color, the bottom of that third column from the right, and blend in these colors a little bit more. So now we've got kind of that set in the design. We can then start to just sort of blend in and blend up the ear a tiny bit. And we've got 2 colors, of course, on the head at the minute. So once you do this, you can then go back to that other color, which we will go to in a moment, and sort of blend them together a little bit nicely. Lovely stuff. Just blending in the base of our ears. So just flicking up them a little bit here and there. You can just smudge if you like, you know, just paint it in. Just paint it in, blend them all together. Lovely stuff. Come down into here. Now I'm going to go ahead and paint this side rather than sort of dash it. I want to paint that in. And then, as I mentioned, we can go to our colors. We can go to the top of the third column. And this is that color that you can see here, here, and in the brighter areas. You can get in here then and maybe flick some hair on top to really kind of blend them all in together. And also paint if you wish. Let's move into the actual eyes and some of the facial features as well. So we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this color here. We'll grab the middle color in the 6th column first. We'll bring the brush size down to about sort of 2% and we're going to draw in the eyes. Now for the eyes, the first thing we want to do is about sort of 3% in fact. We're going to sort of darken up this area. We're going to sort of draw in a quick circle. We're going to darken up kind of the socket area. We're going to bring a little bit of color down this line here because their eyes, they have these beautiful line markings that kind of run astray. So we're just going to darken up here, going to push out down here, darken up the socket, darken up underneath. The other detail we'll also add while we're working with this color is we're going to come down this nose here, and we don't want to go into our whites too much. We're just going to come down this line here, just darkening that up and kind of just blending and painting those two together. We'll do the same on the opposite side, but not quite as heavy. So we're just going to sort of lightly break off the nose from the rest of the face. So we're just adding in those darker details in the eyes. I'm going to make it a bit bigger again and just increase the size of kind of the brow areas above as well. Just pushing in some darker tones around these areas. Down the bridge of the nose is also fine as well. Just pushing that in there. Then we'll go to our colors. We'll grab that dark color that I mentioned, the bottom of the same column, so the bottom of the 6th column. Bring the brush size probably to a little bit of a smaller size, about sort of 2%. We'll sort of very lightly go round in a circle, darken up behind the eyes, give the eyes like that lovely kind of dark edging round it. And then when you go from there, you can then go round here and then push down and over towards here as well. They have these just beautiful markings where the eye has like a flick on the end of it. Darken up inside the eye as well, because we need that to be a little bit darker shortly. So darken up inside the eye. You can see I'm just chucking in the color here. We'll go around the outline that I've just created for you. So go around it, creating that beautiful eye look, nice and moody, nice and beautiful. And then push this line out over here, following the stencil guide. That's all you need to do, just follow the stencil guide. And as you get over here, you can just kind of blend it out on the top, paint it out, just sort of paint it out. And you don't want to make it too much like a flick of some eyelashes, for example. You just want to have that darker line across. Now feel free to turn off your stencil if needs be. Then also in this side over here, we're going to go ahead and darken up down into here. We're going to separate kind of the nose a little bit from the white area, just a tiny bit, and paint it out. So I'm coming down here, and then painting that out and just painting this area here too. So let's now move into the eyes themselves. We'll go to our colors. We've got 2 colors for this. We've got the bottom of the 3rd column. And all we want to do is we want to create some lovely little C shapes. So following sort of where my guide is, my brush size is set to 2%. I'm going to kind of create like a C shape, or U shape, should I say. Little U shape, and then at the top you kind of want to let that color just blend out, and I'm just undoing it because I want to sort of blend out the line at the top, keeping it nice and light where it just rolls around into the sort of shade. We zoom out, that's looking pretty good. I can go ahead and do the same on the opposite side. I'm going to create the U shape, brightening up the bottom side of the eye and just brightening that up. Don't worry about your pupil. If you run into sort of the pupil area, that's fine. We'll fix that in a moment if needs be. Zooming out, got these beautiful yellow eyes, and I'm just going to sort of add the tiniest little bit of color up and under, just to create the rounding of the pupil a little bit more. And we're just doing it really lightly towards the top because we're just showing sort of the shadows a little bit more. We'll then go to our colors and we'll grab the middle color in the 3rd column and reduce the brush size. So down to 1%. And we're just going to, in the bottom area here, just brighten up with a little bit of a line in the yellow, in the sort of the middle of the yellow, to really brighten it up. Now at this point, turn off your stencil and just triple check when you zoom out that you're happy with the eyes. You want those piercing, beautiful eyes. And if you're happy with them, you can then go ahead and just start to sort of change up the shapes of them if needs be. So we'll go to the top of the 4th column. We will go to our brush and change it to about sort of 3% and just run over the top of it if you need to try and shadow back in the top of the eyes a bit more. From there, we'll also go ahead and use this darker tone now just to create some additional details up here in the eyes. So some additional sort of scrapes out from sort of the bridge of the nose, flicking some areas of fur up and around from the eyes. Lovely stuff. A couple of maybe little lines in the middle here, just to add in some additional darker tones in there. And you don't always have to do it nice and dark. We can also go ahead and add in some lighter patches in a moment. We can then go ahead and go to our colors and grab the top color here in that 3rd column from the right, and then get into the gap here and just brighten that up again. Just brighten this up just a tiny bit if you can make it. And then in the gaps between the dark lines, just brighten them up, because then you'll end up with the contrast between the two sides. Let's then go ahead and move into the nose. So I'm going to go back to my stencil and turn it back on. I'm going to go ahead and go to my colors, and let's start adding in some of these colors up here. So let's go to this color first, the middle color in the 5th column. We're going to go ahead and just, where we've got all this empty space, we're just going to go ahead and sort of bring in the sort of structure here of the nose a bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and darken that up now. It's just this lovely little sort of small nose area, and reduce the brush size down to about sort of 2% and just create a little bit of a higher raise on either side. So where it just makes its way up the nose just a tiny bit more. You can always go back to your oranges in a minute. Block this in, just block this in. Lovely stuff. Because the orange is actually going to have to come all the way down to the nose. So we will have to fix that in a moment. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the bottom color in the 5th column, and size probably actually wants to be about the same. We're going to go ahead and just add in some extra color here. Now what we're trying to do at this point is we're trying to separate sort of the snout area here from the face. So I've got this beautiful line here now that separates the two, and I can leave that. I can also sort of blend in certain areas and merge them together. So here to here has been merged, which then I keep a bit of the separation between the two with the separating line, but not too much. I'm going to go ahead and go round here, going to go around this area as well, do exactly the same. And because again we're on one layer and we've done the layer underneath in terms of like how they layer on top of each other, we don't need to worry now about sort of the shading underneath here, because what we do now should be on top. So if we do draw on top of it, that's fine. Brighten up the nose. And I've got little gaps here, little variations in the color. That's great. Now, before we carry on, I'm going to go back to my base color for the browns, which is the bottom of the 3rd column. So we're going to do exactly that. We're just going to bring the brown down. Just going to bring that down, and I'm just going to make sure I've obviously got my stencil on, just bringing that brown down so that I can see where the nose is. I want to make sure at least it runs down towards there, and we'll do exactly that. We'll get started with our nose. So on the same layer, of course, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the top of the 5th column first of all. Reduce your brush size probably down to about sort of 2%, and we want to get this nose shape in here firstly. So we're going to go along here, following that shape of the stencil guide. So it goes down into a point, it nicely rounds off, and then you end up with the sort of the flat edge at the top as well, and you kind of round off the corners. It's almost like a heart shape, but without the dip at the top. Get in here, we'll block in the color, and all these little specks are just going to be additional sort of variations of the nose. That's fine. Then go to your colors and grab the darker color here, the top of the 4th column, and we'll get in here, we'll darken it up. Just going to go down the bottom edge, down this edge as well, down in towards that point. We will do the mouth in a moment. Going to darken up around the very top, and then we're going to draw in 2 nostrils, so keeping it really small, about 1%, just kind of drawing in like a circle here, a bit of a circle here. There are your nostrils, and then you can kind of darken up the middle, leaving a gap on either side, and blending over the top. To blending over the top of your gap. So leaving a tiny little line gap there, blending round, and creating the top of the nose area. Blend around the top here. If you zoom out, you should just about be able to work out the whole of the nose there. We're then going to go ahead and reduce our brush size down to 1%. We're going to create a little line at the bottom here, as you can see in the guide. And then once you've done that, you can then go ahead and draw in the horizontal line. Now you might not be able to see it, of course, underneath your stencil, so you're just going to have to draw it in once and blend it out at the ends. Let the ends fade out with the mouth. Don't let the ends get too sort of dark. Turn off your stencil just so you can see, just zoom out, should I say? I'm losing my words. Zoom out, and then towards the middle, you kind of want to darken up the middle of the mouth and bring the mouth down a little bit. So I've gone to a larger 1%, and I'm just going to blend down underneath the darker line that I'm going to create here. So I'm just going to bring that line across and then blend underneath, blending underneath, almost creating like a bit of a sort of shadow that arcs underneath the line of the mouth. And that should just help it have a little bit sort of more realistic look to it. We want to push this out this way just a little bit on mine anyway, because I need to make sure it's nice and symmetrical. Darkening up in here, creating kind of the lips of the fox. And we're also going to go ahead and we're going to add in some details here of some lines. So I'm going to add in the sort of dot marks, if not lines almost, for where the whiskers are going to sit. So just drawing in some little dash lines here. I'm going to do about sort of 3 lines and just push outwards. Just little sort of specks on there. Again, when you zoom out, you're going to lose a lot of them anyway, but zoom out just to triple check. And then with your brush, just set it to about sort of 3% and darken up just a little bit behind the nose, just a tiny bit. And also down here too, just kind of darkening up, rounding off the sort of the front area, the snout area a bit more. Just adding in a little bit of a shading area there. And I'm going to bring the brush size down to about sort of 2%. I'm going to bring this line down the nose and just blend that up, because where the sort of white fur is, there's also like this really dark line as well. So I'm just going to bring this up and over onto here and blend with the brush. Just blend the two together, let that just come up and over there. We'll do the same over here, but try and keep it a little bit lighter, imagining that this side here is a little bit more sort of shaded. I'm going to blend that then up and over. I'm just squiggling my pen up and down, nothing too sort of serious or anything. Sort of blending that up and over. I'm going to go ahead now and start to get a bit more sort of adventurous with the shading and the highlights. So we're just going to try and, with the same brush, just darken up this side of the nose a bit more, down the bridge of the nose, just adding in a little bit more shading. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors, and we're going to grab this color here, the top of the 4th column from the right, and we're going to try and adjust some of the highlights as well. So probably around about sort of a 5% brush size. I'm going to brighten up this area here of the nose. And then we're going to go ahead and then on the top of the forehead, just continue, but very lightly, kind of just scraping across, lots and lots of scrapes, not too sort of crazy, but just enough that we can add in some sort of more finer, final highlights. And we are almost sort of there, to be honest. So you have sort of made your way through the majority of the harder phases of this. Just getting all the sort of areas of the fox right before we then move into some details and somewhat cover them up. So we're just going to continue here. I'm just very lightly now just scraping. I'm following the curvature of all the fur that we created, creating all the fur lines, and then just really highlighting the top edges, almost like where the lighting is touching the majority of the blades. I keep saying blades, sorry, the strands of hair. Pushing down into here, down in towards this area here. I'm then going to go ahead and take away a little bit of this area here, and I'll do that in a moment with the base color. I'm going to reduce the brush size down to about 3%. I'm going to just add a tiny bit underneath the eye, bring in the highlight out and around down here, add in some more over this side most definitely. Now on this side I'm going to paint a little bit in here, and then paint that out and onto the edge, and then sort of blend them together by just tapping and scraping, blending the two together. That's fine. Got a nice big bright patch up there. I don't mind that too much. I'm going to go ahead in here, just at the top of the nose, just brightening that up a little bit more, down the nose itself. The nose as well, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors, and we're going to double tap in the top left to select white. And the nose, we're going to go on this area and just brighten this up. So we're going to have to reduce your brush size down to about sort of 2% and just scribble in between the lines of your where you're going to put your whiskers in a moment. Scribble in between them, just brightening this edge up a little bit more. Go around the bottom, brightening up this area of the face. Get right up against the nose, and you can add a little bit on the opposite side, maybe just along the lip and underneath. That's also fine. Just brightening up that beautiful, beautiful little face. And when you add the nose, I think once you add the nose at this stage, it kind of brings the whole thing together a little bit more. And talking about the nose, using the white, we will just very lightly just sort of highlight the top of the nose a bit more. You can just add that one line that goes along the top, like you'll see with your dogs as well, just that little bright sort of spot on the top of the nose. And we're going to go ahead and add some whiskers now. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer though for this one. And we're going to go to our colors, and we're just going to go ahead and grab this color here, the top of the 4th column. Same brush, but we're going to reduce it down to about 1%. And we're just going to flick some outwards. I don't want these to get adjusted in any way. So we're just putting them on a separate layer, and we're just running some whiskers out from these points over here. So what I mean by that is we don't want to put them on the same layer as the painting, because if we end up adjusting anything in the painting, these are such fine lines that we don't want to be sort of wary of them. We don't want to sort of have to go back in and fix a line here and there. If you put like a very small detail like this on a separate layer, it's just preserved. We don't have to stress or worry about it. A couple more little sort of little whiskers in there. The other thing I want to do is I want to go back to the actual fox. Same color, but I'm going to just increase the brush size up to about sort of 7%, and I'm just going to sort of darken up around the eyes a bit more and just kind of just boost the contrast a bit more in the face. So darkening up here, pushing that down, just shading almost at this point, and down the edge there of the face, maybe a little bit up here on the head, just painting in at this point, just darkening that little patch up there as if there's a light source coming across. Underneath the face as well, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of just narrow that in a tiny bit and just shading under here, and then I'll scrape down as well. I'm just going to darken up under there and push down, just boosting that contrast, hopefully separating the face a little bit more as well. Now at this point we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in some little details. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to go ahead and grab this color here, the top right of the palette. We're going to go to our brush, but we're going to change it to drawing, and we're going to go to the Blackburn brush. It doesn't really matter what your brush size is. I've got it set to the 2%, even though that's very small. If we tip our pen right on its side, we can scrape along the fur. Now try and follow the direction of the fur. And what we're going to do is with this Blackburn brush, we're going to add little bits of snow that are sort of stuck onto the fox, or it's landed on the fox. And we're just going to add in some lovely areas of fur. Go along the tail, tipping your brush on its side. If you go too down, you're going to get a line and you're going to have to sort of manually draw them in. You kind of just want to sort of scrape along with your brush on its side. You can try your best at maybe just literally just squiggling your pen up and down, see what kind of catches. Everyone's just going to be a little bit random to one another because of the angles we're drawing in, etc. But at the bottom of the fox here, you can just add in some little areas of snow catching on the bottom of the tail, from where it's maybe sort of made its way into this little sort of burrow here in the ground. And then we're just going along the fur, keeping our pressure so gentle so that we can be just really sort of creative and fun with where the snow lands on the fox, and just adding in these beautiful little details which really help the fox sort of blend into its environment and is part of the environment, you know, the weather conditions. And this is what I mentioned earlier, that we're layering on top of the fur, so we're going to end up losing a little bit of the detail here and there. But these little clumps of snow, I think, just look so cool. We'll come down here, and also we've got the driven snow that's going to come from the sky above in a moment. So that's going to really cover up a little bit of the fox. A little bit more of the fox. I'm going to come along here. I'm going to add some more onto the top. Don't want to go too mad. Then on the top of the head, we're going to add some snow as well. So we're just going to go left to right, definitely here in the middle of the head, some that have stuck on there, and try and just do little bits at a time so that you can undo them potentially. Just little areas of snow landing on top. I think these look great. I think they just really help the fox just go to that next level of detail. And the smaller the tiny little sort of scuffs that you can get with this brush, like these tiny little sort of scrapes of the color, tiny little bits of snow here and there, I think are the ones that really make this sort of come to life and really give it its final look. You know, it gives it the most amount of detail if you can get those really fine ones. You know, add a few little bits here on the sort of bridge of the nose as well, along here, seeing if you can add in those tiny little scrapes here and there along the bridge of the nose. I think these look great. I love it. Let's go along the side here as well, making sure we go down here. And when you get into sort of the darker areas, you don't kind of need to sort of worry about that too much. At the bottom here, we're going to go ahead and add some snow onto the chest, where just again, where maybe getting into the position that it's in, maybe it caught some snow on the way down. It's got some just around the base of its chest here in the ground. The tail will continue to add some more onto. It's such a big area, big fluffy area. And because I'm following the line work that we added previously, all the lines of fur, if you end up with a line such as this and this, it just looks like it's sat on top of the fur that you've designed. It just looks like it sits there, it's on top of the fur, and it's meant to be. It's all purposeful. Now here, I'm just adding a little bit more on top of the edge of the the tail down towards the bottom. So I'm quite drawing at the minute, I'm quite literally drawing on top of the tail just to add that extra little bit of snow. And again, I'm just going to follow all the kind of lines. If I get a line, that's fine. It's just one blade of fur that is just catching the snow. And I hope you're enjoying this phase of it as much as I do. When I first initially practiced this and I saw this sort of phase come to life, I thought this is the one. This is the bit that just really pulls it all together. Just going to keep putting it in the snow. Now, what I would suggest is try not to do too much too early. I think I'm nearly there with how much I'm going to add. I am going to go up and down the ears though, just adding in some snow on there too. Whatever sticks, sticks, that's fine by me. A couple of these little areas of fur maybe that go in towards the ear, it's fine. And it's all a layering issue. So I know we spent like a good hour doing the fox, but it was also that if you do see the tiniest little bit of detail come through, like in between the fox and the snow here, that you already have everything in position to not leave an area looking blank. It's got content, it's got somewhere to live, it's got some detail. Now at this point, I'm going to leave my fox as it is because I'm going to add in the driven snow. So I'm going to go up to the very top underneath my stencil. I'm going to create 3 new layers. I'm going to swipe from left to right on all 3 and I'm going to group them together. I'm going to rename the group and I'm going to call it Driven Snow. And we're going to rename the bottom one. I'm going to call it S for small. I'm going to rename the middle one. I'm going to call it M for medium. I'm going to rename the top one. I'm going to call it L for large. I want them on separate layers just in case I want to change them. So we're going to go to the large layer. We're going to make sure our color is still the same color of the snow. We're going to go to our brushes though, and we're going to go ahead and go into the option of elements and driven snow. I've got 3 sizes and they are the large, medium and small. We've got 100%, we've got 44 and we've got 13. If we go to 100% and we now start to scrape down the screen, we can add in different pressure and we can add in the snow. It's going to come down from the top, of course. Go all the way down towards the bottom of your canvas as well. Overlap your fox and then go to the middle layer, the medium layer. Drop the size down to the 44% and add in some smaller areas of snow. Keep your pressure nice and light. Sometimes it will add in some nice blurry looking snow, and feel free to add in as much or as little as you like. I would advise that you know spend some time making sure that you sort of get a good amount for each layer first and then go back. So don't go too mad with the medium first of all. Then go to your layer, go to the small one, go down to the 13% mark. Now this is very, very small if I'm honest. They are tiny, tiny little sort of fine ones in there. So try not to sort of draw like crazy like this. Just utilize it where you want to, just maybe in some little gaps here and there. We can just add in some finer detailing and snow. Towards the top, maybe add in some good amounts of it maybe. But you've got good control. And with the smaller one, you can be really precise on where you sort of layer it on top of the fox. You don't want to get too many over its face and whatnot. And that is also something to look for. Try not to do any that maybe cover up the eyes. That's a really easy way of making your fox look a little bit weird. So if I now go to my large layer and reduce the brush size down of my eraser and get rid of this area here, I can keep the eye and preserve it, making sure it doesn't lose any of its details. And then we just need to make some adjustments to the ground and the atmosphere as well. So we're going to go ahead and collapse that group down. I'm going to go to the front bank and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to tap on that layer and I'm going to clipping mask it. I'm going to go to my colors. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to grab this color here. It's the top of the second column from the right. We're going to go back to our painting brush for today, the Salamanca. The brush size, I'm going to make it probably around about sort of 19%. And we're clipped to this layer here at the front. Now I just want to sort of literally zigzag, wave my pen left to right, left to right, left to right, and just painting in. And if you get any sort of too solid lines, just sort of draw over the top of them again. And I just want to sort of vary up the ground here. Maybe over here, if I go sort of left to right a few more times, I can create what looks like a very subtle little mound of snow. So just using this brush now, just to add in some subtle areas of snow. Go right up kind of close to the fox. As you get a little bit closer, you can let your pressure get a little bit lighter here and there. And if you focus on maybe one that's going to be a little bit darker, it will just add some lovely variation to the ground surface. Again, creating sort of mini sort of burrows and whatnot. Then reduce your brush size down to maybe about sort of a small size that you can get in behind the lumps and bumps that you've made. So if I go down to about sort of 7% on the back end of some of these little lumps that I've created in the ground, I'm just going to create like a little bit of a shadow on the back end and push it out to the left and just push that out. Over here, I'm going to grab that, I'm going to push it out to the left and then just create little sort of trails off from it as well. So I'm going to create a bit of a shadow here. Be really light as you can be to start with. Take a look at your work, you'll just start to see like a couple of little sort of lumps and bumps come to life, a bit more 3D now. I've dropped the brush size down to about sort of 5% because I want to get some small sort of just wicked jagged lines just in front here, and then go back into some of the big bumps and blend up towards them. Like there's something else just in front of this ridge that this fox is occupying, and just shadowing. Now, I wouldn't advise, to be honest, doing every single bump and lump, because if you do every single one exactly the same as well, you're going to end up with too much repetition. It's going to be easy to spot. Also, don't go along this line here, because what we're going to do is, once you're happy like I am with this area here, we're going to go to our layers and we're going to go to our back bank. We're going to create a new layer in front of it. We're going to go ahead and make our brush size about sort of 7%, and we're going to add like a shadow behind the fox and in between the ridge lines. So we're going to go ahead with the banks. I've got about 8%, and I'm just going to sort of push outwards like so, and that will darken up the more you sort of press around the sort of base of the fox, and just let that sort of blend out. Likewise over here, let's just imagine that there's a little bit of a shadow for whatever reason just in front here of the fox as well. We're just separating the two ridge lines, just blend it out, let it fade out, let it fade backwards, or maybe it's just like a big dip, a big sort of groove, a big crevice that this fox is occupying, and that's why we've got this lovely shadow, that it's in its little space, it's in its little sort of stationary position, and that will also help you separate the front from the back. Now what we'll do is we'll just add some extra color and atmosphere as well. So we'll go to our layer, the one that we're working on, we'll tap on it for a minute and we will clipping mask it. So it's clipped to the back bank. I don't want you to use any additional layers necessarily. And we're going to go to our colors and grab the middle color in the second column from the right. Same brush, but a little bit larger, about sort of 21%. And I'm going to really brighten it up in the top right area up here and kind of just blend across, creating just additional sort of area of sort of brighter tone in the ground. It's just going to be very, very subtle. You might not be able to see it too well, but it will just be up here and just a little bit brighter on that top edge. Same color, we're going to go ahead and create another new layer. We're going to go to our brush and we're going to go to airbrushing and the soft brush. I'm going to set it to about sort of 10% and just go around in a circular motion, kind of blend out that back bank a little bit over here, and then just randomly, honestly, super random, just wiggle your pen up and down in the sky area above, creating little additional areas of blizzard, a little bit more atmosphere up here. Maybe make it about sort of 12% and really, focus in on really showing us how dense this blizzard is, that this fox is just having a moment to itself before it maybe moves onwards. And just take away a little bit more of the sky, blending this area out over here and pushing that round in a circular motion. Now the changes I want to make at this point is I'm going to go to my colors and I'm going to grab the top color in that second column from the right. On the layer that's clipped to the back bank, I'm just going to go ahead and just expand on the shadows just a tiny bit, pushing them left and right just a tiny bit more. I'm also going to go ahead and go to my layers and go to the layer that's clipped to the front, because now I've done the back. The layer that's clipped to the front bank, I'm going to go back to my painting brush and the Salamanca, bring that down, and I'm going to be braver now with just sort of adding in some darker areas here at the front. So just darkening these up just in front of the fox, just creating a bit sort of more character in the ground. Maybe bring the brush size down to about 4% and create some little sort of wiggle lines here and there, just showing where there's little ridges in the snow where they've just tumbled over, maybe just in front of the fox, where it's maybe dug just to create some more shelter. Just this additional little sort of detailing at the front here will just help a little bit more. A little bit in here too. Again, I'm just kind of squiggling my pen as well, just to maybe show where little balls of snow have just made their way down a little bit into the area just in front of these mounds. Now, me personally, I'm going to go to my fox. I'm going to go ahead and grab a dark color, say the top of the 4th column. The brush is going to still be the same one we've used throughout all of it. About an 8% brush size. I'm going to darken up the eyes a little bit. I'm going to take away them. To me, mine look a little bit too animated. They look a little bit too easy to see. Whereas right now, I can see them just about enough that, I can see them through the blizzard, but they're not too piercing and too easy to spot and cartoony and vibrant. I want it to be toned down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and maybe reduce the brush size down to about sort of 4% now, and just maybe darken up a tiny bit around the top of the eyes. Just to add in a bit more depth and a bit underneath the eye as well. Just to add in, again, a little bit more depth, a bit of a darker look to it, making it hopefully a little bit more realistic to look at. And an additional detail we can do is we can go ahead and create another new layer. We can go to our colors and we can grab this color here. It's the middle color in the 4th column from the right. If we change our brush though, we go to the dry brush and we set this layer to add, but you may need to reduce it down afterwards. So I'm going to set it to add at 100% to start with. The brush size is going to be set to 4%. You can go ahead and just drag down in the direction of the fur in a very quite erratic way, and you can highlight some areas of fur using this brush. This is totally optional, but the effect that this can give can look very, very good. So I'm just going to go ahead and just sort of scrape down here. I'm going to scrape along the edge here of the tail, just sort of brightening them up the most. And because this brush has got quite a sharp look to it, every sort of scrape that you're doing, you're bringing out some of the fur potentially. So you're bringing out individual sort of strands of fur. And because it's set to add as well, it's just going to sort of change depending on the area that you decide to sort of draw it on with. So if I go ahead and just really brighten up the body here and down into this groove, and you can brighten up onto the back as well. Brightening up the sort of main area here, down into here. A little bit more on the edge of the head. Just going to go down here, up on the top of the head as well, kind of like edging the sort of highlights on the edge of the fur where they're at their thinnest. And go along the head, and go along here too. Zooming out, it should have a lot more sort of a brighter aesthetic to it, a little bit more of a more contrasty look. Now, as I mentioned, once you're sort of happy with how much you've added in, like I am, that's all I want to add. Potentially even grab my eraser and take away some of this. Kind of just leave it a little bit more on that top edge. You can then go ahead and just tap on it, lower the opacity to something that you like the look of. If I bring that down and I bring that down to maybe around about sort of 55%, we get some good additional color tones in there. Again, totally optional, but something that you can do if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and pinch with 2 fingers. I'm going to go full screen before, and we end up with today's finished design. I thank you so much if you made it through this tutorial. We spent a long time on the fox, and truth be told, it could have probably been a little bit faster if I didn't want to spend so much time building up the tones. With a design like this, you can make it as detailed as you want and then as quick as you want, or you can spend the time to really build up the colors and make sure that you're happy with the aesthetic. I think we managed to do 2 things in this tutorial. We drew the fox with without all the snow details on top and tried to learn how to sort of build up colors in fur. And also then once we got to the final stages and we added in the snow on top and all the sort of environment around it, we really sort of added in a second variation almost of our fox. So a lot of those details might have been covered up essentially, but we spent the time to learn the process regardless. As always, if you manage to share yours with me on social media, find me wherever I am. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you can do one even better and share it with the community over on Discord. And as always, a massive shout out to my supporters over on Patreon who help make these videos possible. If you want to support me over on Patreon, but most importantly, get access to a catalogue of over 80 tutorials at the time of recording, hit the link in the description down below. You can get your name featured in videos, access to 3 exclusives every single month, sneak peeks, early access, and much, much more. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll like this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.